Ministry advisor to the board. She joins in almost 11 minutes.
It's going to be online, visible. Yeah. Welcome back, Dwayne.
Thanks, folks.
Calling the meeting to order. Unfortunately, member Body and member Tammy are not able to join us today, but we do have a forum with member Pierce and member Sampson. Just prior to today's meeting, the board met in closed sessions to review and discuss matters that, in their opinion, fell under Section 35 Police Services Act, and as per the Wisconsin Police Services Bylaw, Section 19.1, closed items. Moving on, if I could have a motion to approve the agenda. Jill, thank you. Eric, all in favor? Any declaration of conflict of interest arising out of the matters listed on the agenda? Hearing none. Presentations. Today we have a presentation from Constable Siobhan Martin regarding the core enforcement unit that's there and the work that they're doing not only in downtown core but across our city. So with that being said, Constable Martin, I'll turn it over to you.
Again, just introduce Constable Derek Edmiston. So day 2 for Derek. So as you're aware, we were able to expand the core unit as a result of our grant funding. So Derek is a very recent addition to core on day 2. So any complex questions you have after this presentation, directed to Derek. And thanks for coming, guys.
Okay, well, thanks for having us again. I think this is my second appearance in 2 or 3 months. I won't be here next month, but I'll tell you a little bit about the core unit and what we've been doing and what we, some ideas that we have on the go.
Work when we tested it.
Yeah, it worked. So, can I do that? So the core unit right now consists of myself. I started in July of 2021. I think I'm in my 14th year of policing. And as of yesterday, Derek Edmiston has joined me. Introduce yourself, Derek.
Yeah, Derek Edmiston. I've been on service now for 8 years. Obviously, Siobhan needed somebody to boss around. So there I am. And what she's been doing over the last year has been actually really great. So I'm excited to join.
Just some future members of the core unit, maybe someday. So the core unit did exist, last existed in 2017. At that time it was myself and Constable Nick Houston. Didn't get up and running too long before it collapsed due to staffing issues, again, largely due to myself and those future members arriving, which took me out of here for a little while. The previous core unit was primarily, the focus was primarily enforcement, but due to some things changing in society, we've shifted our focus. So before we would spend a lot of time kind of making a lot of warrant arrests and doing some checks on people's conditions. However, we found, again, things have changed. Warrant arrests don't result in much time in custody anymore. So we find people, we arrest on warrants and they're out the door before we're completed our paperwork. So that's still getting done. However, it's not kind of what it used to be. Same with some administrative breaches and things like that that used to get time in custody. It's just not happening. So you get the same people just released back before we've left the station, completed our work to further commit crimes. So the unit was reinstated in July of 2021, myself placed in it. It's now got a very different focus. We focus a lot more on community involvement, some relationship building with our community partners and local businesses. and the effective targeting of hotspots, again, which I'll explain a little bit later. We've had to kind of shift our focus on how that is done. So last summer when I started, again, it was kind of a clean slate. So I started with a lot of foot patrol, primarily in the River District. It did expand out to different areas within the city, but I basically started by introducing myself to most of the business owners, talking with staff, talking with community members that I met while in the River District. My focus at that time was just to introduce the newly implemented core unit, talk to people just to see what their issues were, and provide my personal contact. And I explained to everybody that if police were needed for an emergency, to continue calling as they always did in the past to get immediate response. However, for issues that were maybe chronic or ongoing, or if they just had inquiries or questions, or wanted some advice on how to deal with things, they had my personal contact to get in touch with me. I found very quickly that conversation with people went a long way. A lot of the complaints were kind of generally just people loitering downtown and needles and people high and acting kind of out of the ordinary, walking the streets, and people had now encountering the homelessness and people in banks and vestibules that we hadn't experienced in the city much before. And that was kind of the common complaint. But once you had a conversation and kind of explained that other things that have been happening, the homelessness issue, that lack of housing, the drugs, just the fact that we're not charging for possession of drugs, kind of like we used to, that we are seeing it more. And once you explain to them kind of, it's not necessarily a lot of the time something that police can really solve. We can maybe deal with it at the time, but we're really just moving the problem on it. So once I explained that there is the Trespass to Property Act, however, for many of these people that we would be dealing with, it's a $65 ticket. They really don't have to pay, because again, tickets affect your driver's license. If they don't have a driver's license, it's just a piece of paper, which I often would just get thrown back at me, crumpled up and thrown back at me. So it's not really a solution to the problem. Same with housing. Once I explained that there are services, however, a lot of the people experiencing homelessness have either been through services, or they've declined services, or they've had their nights given in a hotel and they've either destroyed property, or they've kind of worn out their welcome. So once you explain that, people are a little bit more understanding, and we just kind of work on what maybe we can do to try and solve that. So I do find conversation, honest conversation with people has really gone a long way, and it's been well received. So part of the core unit is to provide proactive patrol and high visibility, and that's achieved through regular foot patrols, just being present in some of the areas in the city, River District, at our schools, within parks. We do walks through the malls, arenas, the rec center, and then problem areas as they arise. So encampment sites have been a big one and are increasing right now just with the weather changing. Certain residential areas will get complaints about, and then requests from businesses. So some businesses will reach out and say they're having issues and just request us to spend some extra time there. Derek's only had one day in the unit here, but we've done a walk through one of the alleyways or pathways in the River District down in the 1000 block of 2nd Avenue East, which I can walk down there at any time and find numerous needles in behind. I've worked with the property manager to try and come up with maybe a solution, but anyway, we utilize the needle safe disposal site, and I usually will try to take a sharps container with me and just clean it up, because it is in the daytime they're being deposited. So we're trying to use police presence as a deterrent, and in speaking with a lot of people, they've expressed that there is an increased sense of security and safety among them and among people down in the River District, just by having more of a presence down there. And again, that's something that the officers on the road have always tried to do. We've always tried to maintain our foot patrol. However, just with call volume increasing, it is making it a little more difficult for those officers to get in as much or get out as much as they could. So that's something that we can fill in. Another thing that we spend a lot of time on are community complaints and hotspots within the city. And those can originate through a variety of different ways. Complaints to the chief will come in, complaints to the mayor and city hall from citizens. They may come in through personal interactions that I have with people. repeated calls for service. I try and keep track of, go through the occurrences to see if we're getting a lot of incidents reported at specific areas, and then I can shift, or we can shift our focus to that area and try and come up with a solution to eliminate or decrease the number of calls. So these photos are just of I believe this came as a result of a letter from neighbors. It's a row house. This was a row house that was just kind of being used as a flop house, and a large amount of drug activity happening. Neighbors on both sides were complaining of rats in their units as a result of this unit. So I reached out to the landlord. The sheriff's office stepped in, and they ended up proceeding with a order to vacate and eviction. So got everybody out of there, got it boarded up, and neighbors are happier. Social media is another one that kind of generates complaints and hotspots. And again, it's probably a result of me spending too much time on social media, but a few times I've seen where someone will just post their whole rant on a public site, and it's whether it's complaints against the city hall, or the police. This one in particular was just about an abandoned house that the kids got picked up. They had to stand in front of this abandoned residence, wait for the bus, and they were finding people sleeping on the porch, needles and drug paraphernalia left. So I guess she got the runaround a little bit from here and from Public Works and from the city about whose responsibility this was. So I just reached out to her. We ended up, we worked on a solution to maybe meet the bus a little bit down the road, and I was able to get the owner of that building to kind of secure it to prevent people from sleeping under the deck. And so just again, increased presence really helped, and it satisfied the parents that had to stand there with their children. And then just as of yesterday, again, we came across this post. It was somebody selling some kayaks. It was a great deal. However, from looking at the pictures and knowing the individual, we knew she was homeless. The kayaks were posted from her campsite, and we knew she was not in a position probably to have those kayaks purchased legally. So yesterday we went on a bit of a hike on the east side of the city to locate the campsite. We eventually found it after a couple hours, and the kayaks were there under that tarp. So we took them and determined they came from Canadian Tire. We were happy to get them back, and we'll be following up with charges this afternoon. But our goal was just to try and get the kayaks before they received the $550 for them. So again, to deal with these, we just do kind of a targeted enforcement, high visibility presence, and utilize some community partners to assist us in any way in dealing with these issues. These numbers at the bottom, they're just some residential house numbers that have been problem areas or problem houses throughout the city that we've received complaints on that we've been able to come up with solutions for. OSDSS and St. Mary's are also included in there. They've had some problems, OSDSS, with the students returning back to school and their effect on the businesses in the area, drug activity, drinking, just kind of when they filter out at lunchtime. And St. Mary's, the neighborhood, again, has issues with the students. So I kind of think of CORE as kind of the missing link between patrol officers and the community. As I said before, the patrol officers, you have good intentions, and I did myself as well. You have good intentions that you'll look after a problem and you'll try and come up with a solution, but the calls keep coming in. So you almost get too busy to maintain that. But I find that, again, we aren't responding to those calls. So we have the time and just that time to spend and devote and be that personal link between whether it's a neighborhood or a business to deal with their problem versus them having to call into dispatch day after day or week after week and explaining their problem to a different officer each time that doesn't really have the time to maintain that follow-up. Another large part of our job is community events, again, for that presence. And we work closely with Community Service Officer Jason Cranny. So the top list there is just some community events that I've been a part of since starting. Santa Claus Parade, Northern Lights, Coldest Night of the Year fundraising walk. We just did Shop with the Cop and a few others. And then we have some upcoming ones this summer. I think it's going to be quite busy with Bike Rodeo, Sound Waterfront Festival, the Pride Parade, and the other events that happen. We also want to have some of our own events. And I find we're often present at other events happening throughout the city, but what I'd like to see is us as a police service host our own events. And I think we're gonna try and start small with just some kind of pop-up neighborhood barbecues, utilizing our summer students to maybe advertise within that neighborhood. And we just have our barbecue there, have it at a park, and hopefully have some officers that can come on duty, off duty, and again, just make it our event and us not be part of another event, just so it's a standalone. We also spend some time assisting other units within the service. So again, our office is out of the criminal investigations branch. So depending on what they have going on, we may assist there, whether it's with, again, depending on their caseload, we may assume smaller cases, whether it's sex assaults. I've been recently utilized to do some child interviews for sexual assaults, some DNA warrants if they need written. Anything else, sometimes they'll utilize us to do observations on houses that they may be working on. This photo is just from a recent search warrant we did. It was stolen property from Home Depot. A lady used a neighbor's credit card to basically try and outfit her apartment with this property. So I was utilized for some observations, and then at the search warrant, we also assist the drug unit, again, mainly I would say for observations for them, and then when they do a search warrant. Now this one in particular was actually a neighborhood complaint just behind the station here. Neighbors were complaining, that's a daycare right there, and drug activity at a house. So again, pretty offensive that it was happening right beside a place where there's 26 children on a daily basis. So we worked with the neighborhood, I worked with Constable Hawk, and a search warrant was successfully executed there. And neighbors are happy for now. I assist Constable Hartley with the MPART program. I've done a couple of Mental Health Act apprehensions with him. And we also have an ongoing case that, not a case, but an individual who's being transitioned from hospital into life in his own residence. So we do some visits with him, and we sit on a monthly meeting just to see where his progression is and to let workers know and kind of what the police response will be if we are called to deal with him now that he's living with care, but in his own residence. And we assist uniform patrol. If there's a call or numerous calls coming in with an area that we've already been dealing with, we can take those. We fill in if needed for training purposes and anything else that might be required. And community partners, another big thing. We liaise with numerous community partners within the city. These are just a few of them. The bylaw department, more and more, I'd say, especially with the encampments coming out. This was one out by the soccer complex. It's quite an impressive structure that was built. But he was stealing hydro from a hydro tower. It's very obviously dangerous. And they worked with, so I worked with bylaws, and they did the liaising with the property owner, and that got removed. We work with YMCA Housing. We'll do regular encampment walks to offer supports to people that are living in tents and encampments around the city. I also will reach out to them if I encounter somebody on the street that again may need some housing, and they can assist with that. And we've got some positive ticket sponsors, hopefully getting some more, and that's to recognize youth that we find when they're out committing good deeds or following rules. So we had Freshie, we had Sunday's ice cream, and we had Circle K, who provided us with some coupons. And these are just some others. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but some that we work regularly with. We have good relationship with the schools. The housing, Grey County Housing is great. Keystone Community Living, CMHA. So lots that we liaise with on a regular basis. This one gets its own page. It's probably my favorite part of my week. The Reach Center on 8th Street. We're trying to kind of have a partnership with them. They have a weekly cafe. They haven't quite opened it to the public, but I think that is their plan. So we try and drop by, and I try and take someone new with me every week to their cafe, and we just again interact with the participants there. They also provide some catering services. They have a full commercial kitchen, so we're hopefully going to utilize that for many functions that we have. And I'll touch on this a little bit later. And future initiatives. So there's some ideas that we have. Again, it's nice to have Derek with me now because it'll help all these ideas that we have we'd like to implement. Bicycle thefts, it's kind of a constant thing. It increases in the summer. I've also heard that the Y has been experiencing some thefts from the change room. So got some ideas going around about maybe doing a bait project where we have a tracker on a bike or a backpack and plant them somewhere and see who is stealing these things. Derek came to the unit with a great idea about trying to come up with a solution, if that's possible, with the River District and after bar close. Now that COVID restrictions have lifted, we're seeing an increase. Well, the bars are open now, and we're seeing an increase in numbers. So I met a week ago with the owner of the Harb and Smugglers. I guess the first week or two weekends ago, it was lots of problems originated after bar close, and those problems, they filter out and into the whole River District, cause mischief. We get fights, we get quite a few things just based on the number of people. So Derek came up with an idea to talk to maybe work with the cab companies and try and come up with a solution to get people moved out quicker than they do, so they aren't lingering and loitering around. We would like to partner with Mowikwadong and do a kind of a canoeing event, barbecue with some of the youth that are involved in their programming. So that's something we're going to look at shortly. Human trafficking lunch and learn for the service industry. We'd like to host that to target, I guess, taxis, hotel, motel staff, and maybe the food delivery services, just for some signs to look out for human trafficking. I'd also like to get going on our residential and commercial security footage registry and mapping system. We've done a little bit with some of the businesses in town to know who has security footage, but I'd also like to extend that to residences. A lot of people have their own systems now, and again, it would be completely voluntary if they would like us to know that or not. But if we could map them and have kind of a log of them, we'd at least know when we get an incident who to start with and who may have cameras and where those cameras may target. And then Reach and OSHARE prisoner meal partnership. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I am going to put together something more formal for a future meeting. But currently, our meals for prisoners in custody are provided by Tim Hortons. They have a breakfast and then a lunch and dinner. That requires officers to attend Tim Hortons and pick those meals up as needed. Again, when you're busy day, at the end of the day, it's usually at shift change, dinner time. It's just one extra thing. So I've been working with Reach and spoken to OSHARE, and my proposal is just going to be that Reach has agreed to provide a bag, which we could keep here at the station, and then OSHARE will provide sandwiches. So it'll eliminate the constant to Tim Hortons. It will be a cost savings. It will also be allocating funds to two organizations within the city that could use them. There'll be a time savings. We won't have to be running out because we will have a stock of those at the station at all times. We will have to go and pick up some sandwiches, but maybe 3 times a week versus every day. And we will establish partnerships with 2 organizations within the city. But more on that to follow.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Well done.
Brings core alive.
Any questions for Derek?
Good luck.
Could have moved that on.
Sounds like an ambitious project.
I think it's an excellent project. I think it's, based on some of the stats we've seen and comments we've had before, it's just an amazing project.
Yeah,
Going on.
it's good. Again, I kind of described it to you as the best of both worlds. It took me a little bit to wrap my head around. It's a big shift from enforcement and call to this, but I think I described it as the best of both worlds, because you get to still do a little bit of that and you get to be involved, but then you get, to interact primarily with people who are happy to see you for the most part, or you're trying to help them. And again, then when stuff's happening major in our investigative branch, then we're a part of that. So it's great.
We know call volumes are high. So it's nice to see that we've found a way to be proactive. Yeah, it's exciting, and the feedback's been very good.
So I'll just take the opportunity to recognize Siobhan's efforts from last year. It's been outstanding. It's really piloted the project, got it back to what, and as she said, it's changed from what it was when it was shut down in 2017. That was before I got here, but certainly the vision, the ideas and the direction that the senior leadership team want to take this, Siobhan's run with it and done an amazing job with it. And so some recognition for you, Siobhan, and I'm sure Derek, your mentor, will set you off in the right foot.
She's laid a good
And
foundation. Yeah.
absolutely. And we're excited to have that option of having the proactive response to calls and problems and issues. And when they say what kept you awake at night, there, as you knock one thing off the list, the next thing starts. And what at one point early on when my arrival was the fact that we had no proactive response to respond to any of the types of situations we have now. And as that builds, I just think it's going to become more and more clear how important that is to the community and how important it is for the police service, because all those things that you're doing, all those projects would just be great ideas and innovations and things that could sit on the desk and never get done unless you actually have the resources and bodies. And thank you to the board for supporting that initiative to move forward with the proactive response and to the city in order to pay for it. And now the opportunities with the grant funding for the next 3 years to expand it some more with the work that they did on that grant. It's outstanding. And I think to see all those are amazing ideas, and we'll get you back for a third meeting this year. So, for the program. So, but I mean, that's just another example. It creates capacity and it assists two other community partners, and it builds that relationship and builds that trust, so that with the individuals that you're working with and the community supporting partners. So I think it's been excellent. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, guys. Well done.
Save it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Neat. That's some great work you're doing. Nice.
It's so refreshing to get officers that can think outside the box, but be able to come up with ideas like that and want to work on them.
Yeah.
That for some reason seems to be a big barrier for a lot of them. We have a lot of people that come to work every day, go to calls that they get sent to every day, but it never goes beyond that. I mean, that's what starts to see leadership and stuff kicks me in once you look at it. So I mean, you feel good that there's something coming up from below that's so a lot of those growing ideas just sort of said, what about? And she still hasn't fixed it over the bow on it. So
Yeah. Really thinking outside the box. And I think too, where she is, they have the opportunity to make those ideas work. They have the time and the resources to do it. So I think that's great.
even just business interaction and that sort of thing. I mean, that's Jeff Pearson from DIA and that sort of thing, but I mean, absolutely don't have this. All they see is cars driving back. They have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
Without that piece, I mean, it's so important to have that ambassador piece that's down there, and I'd be very happy if they complain that she's been there 6 times, you know, this, and they can, in our grant as well, we have money put in for getting some decent bikes and that sort of thing, so we're really gonna be, and some bike programs to be more visible down there this summer. We'll have both of them out, possibly even a third, depending on that person on board, but I think that visibility is just going to go up as well, so certainly good things coming.
Yeah.
So,
All right, moving on to item number 5, confirmation of minutes of public session held April 27th. Have a motion for this? Garth, thank you. Jill, second. All in favor? Any business arising out of the public session minutes on April 27th? None. Correspondence received. I received an email from Zone 5 Secretary inviting us to the quarterly Zone 5 meeting on June 7th. I think a copy of this was sent to all of you. And this meeting will be via Zoom. They thought about having it in person, but I guess the general consensus was for now to be via Zoom. I mean, also knowing the fact we've also distributed the spring 2022 edition of Crime Stoppers and Career Brews. It's a pretty interesting read and provides activities that involved us over the last few months. I didn't have any other correspondence from our last meeting. Moving on to Chairman's report, the Ontario Association of Youth Service Boards is holding a spring conference in HM in Toronto, starting today and going till Friday. Member Pearson, I will be attending in person, and I think Member Sampson will be participating via Zoom, and I think also member Tamming will also be participating. Other than that, I have nothing more to add on the chairman's report. Wayne Sprague, this is from our Solicitor General. And Wayne, is there anything that you want to contribute to the open session, public session meeting today?
No, nothing to report right now, Board Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to reports from Inspector Bishop.
Criminal investigations, drug enforcement. Very first item that you see on there is actually, there's pictures of that from Council Martin's presentation. So that I would say is typical of what we would refer to as hotspot, but from time to time, that's the one that you talked about being right next to the nursery school. And I can also tell you, I probably got about 30 phone calls because there's an individual that is very close to that, as my cell phone number as well, was calling me very regularly about it, as well as some other neighbors. Mayor was hearing about it, Deputy Mayor was hearing about it, because we had an active drug absence going on there. Thing probably took us close to 4 to 5 weeks to resolve, which is typical, not because of any slow motion policing, but just that's really what the end result of a lot of the changes in legislation, that sort of thing, have resulted. Years ago, when we did more enforcement on users and that sort of thing, it gave us more tools when we're dealing with something like that, be able to get information, make a few small arrests, be able to get to a search warrant much faster than we're able to now, where some of that stuff is really out of the toolbox. So yeah, it took our drug unit close to 5 weeks to get the search warrant and all the information, and that's technical means going on over there, all of that sort of thing is wrapped together, but that's, unfortunately the frustration for the public as it keeps going on. They call on day one and want you to be dealing with that afternoon, and it just doesn't work that way. But you'll see, obviously, the results there were huge. $68,000 drug seized, 150 grams of fentanyl. Sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with a product that's sold in 1/10 of a gram, that's huge. That's the stuff you regularly hear about us telling you was killing people here in town regularly. So that's a very large seizure for fentanyl. Firearm located, as well as $3,000 in stolen tools. Stolen from a regular downtown Sound. Not untypical for drug location, is they often take in stolen property, return for drugs. So anyway, a great seizure. Unfortunately, what we see with those, we'll probably be dealing with that same individual not too long from now in a different location. It'll just flare up. It'll take us another 4 to 5 weeks. The names don't change a lot. It's usually when we're dealing with these, it's the same players we deal with regularly, but COVID and the catch and release program has compounded some of that. We're not getting the immediate jail sentences that are coming out of it. Sometimes it can be out very soon after that, and it just starts to different for us. So it's a bit of a revolving door, and appreciate that it's frustrating the community, but that's how we deal with those. Cindy's currently working on a luring investigation with online mail with 3 separate young females between 11 and 13. I did solicit them for sexual activity and getting images. Again, that's working through the search warrant production order system in order to get the information required to get positive identification of open charges. So it's ongoing. 16-year-old student on a 14-year-old student sexual assault at area high school. The next one, the fraud, was also one that was referred to by Constable Martin recently. That was a woman that got about $14,000 purchases from people on a credit card and wasn't hers. Again, large investigation, search warrants, and pretty much all of that property was recovered and returned to Home Depot. Female accused charged. There's also a case they were found with a bail breach, which was a domestic violence offender who had been released with a GPS bracelet, breached his bail term, and cut out his bracelet and disappeared to gloves. So, tracking warrant had to be obtained for him at his location, got him rearrested and remains in There's a number of instances of uniform system uniform through CIB. There's a SIU incident that since been closed that they were assisting in locating an email for that. Spent a fair bit of time with the request actually for IT and CIB, but important Great Britain was dealing with a domestic incident where the victim had since relocated here. So they were trying to run the court hearing in England remotely, and we had to jump through a bunch of hoops on the IT side, and locating and preparing this witness on behalf of the UK court systems. That was something a little bit different for us. We have a couple of historical sexual assaults that I've been working through. Detective Constable Tremblay. One is fairly large with multiple victims, and also having to get outside services with Ottawa Water, assisting in interviewing victims that are no longer living in their area due to historic nature. In terms of MHART, the statistics are there. MHART's been participating in mental health outreach that's been going on at Old Sound Farmers Market. Bi-weekly on Wednesdays, which has a number of the area community support organizations that set up down there basically to provide the offers of free support for already financial assistance, housing, mental health, physical health, nutrition, and addiction support. So being part of that support group, they've been participating in that as well. The remainder of the report shows you just we did have a fair bit of training that went on. Block training took up a large part of April, so virtually every officer in the service has been going through their spring block training, firearms qualifications, and a number of meetings that will happen as well. We've also been utilizing CIB to assist with both interviews for some of our hiring and background investigations in the CIB. So we're very busy hiring. They end up being very busy trying to develop backgrounds, not only for dispatch students, the special constables that we brought in, and then again, getting another round in a few weeks for constable experience, constable applications that just came in. So we're busy doing that. And I'm happy to report that to date we've had no other drug overdoses. So hopefully going to keep up with that trend because it's been going in the wrong direction for some period of time, but we're still at 3 for the year. I guess that was about 3 months since we've had one recently, so that's very good. Heading in the direction. That's CIB and drugs. That's any other questions? Auxiliary is back in action. We've been doing ride-alongs, including traffic patrols, going through downtown licensed establishments with our officers. In April, there was a almost on Earth Day parade that happened on April 23rd down the River District, which they assisted with. They helped out with added additional patrol configuration of the events, which is starting into our busy season, summer events, and they will be even busier along the other events that are coming up, actually starting mostly in June. 92 total hours of auxiliary time donated for the month of April. Auxiliary report. Move on to core. We just had that presentation. We've got a better handle on a lot of the things that the core has been doing. Basically, she's got quite a list here of the items. The month of April was quite busy. Helping out with CMHA in terms of both education on both directions, learning more about what they do and what we can do with the system. And we've been having some issues with lawyer investigation in the building. Constable Martin touched on it briefly, but we put a lot of hours into a 17-year-old male that is transitioning from hospital care into the community. And there's been a lot of meetings related to supports being put in place and checks being done with that individual. Great County Housing has had a number of tenant issues, which is one of the bread and butter things the Corps has been dealing with, which often results in trespass notices and that sort of thing. Great County Housing tends to have issues issues on a regular basis. She's also been up to the high school recently, dealt with a suspicious vehicle that's been hanging around some of the younger female students, and also dealing with personal issue on female students up there that's been having personal attendance issues. And Siobhan was hoping to arrange a meeting to address that as well. We're just finishing up the Georgian College mentorship program that was pairing up the security students with our officers here. We had 3 officers involved in the mentorship, and that's just finishing up, and they're completed their evaluations and presentations. So this is the quick control locations, some of the CIB stuff that's been happening. We've got to utilize some Martin with some of the backgrounds, just in volume. She's also trained up as a child witness investigator, so she assists on the CIB investigations involved with that. There's a listing of the problem areas or our hotspots, 900 blocks, and the search warrant that we spoke about that's included. There are a couple of others that are currently ongoing within the process. We'll deal with them as well. Campus. So she's up at St. Mary's High School with a lawyer, aggressive driving, and trespassing, and just listing training meetings. It was, any questions? That's Mark's report.
Thank you, Inspector. Moving on to reports from Inspector Sweeney.
Here's so collision statistics for the month of April. We had 30 collisions, 15 on the east side, 3 on the west side, and 12 parking lots. 5 of the collisions were filled lanes, and 16 of the total collisions were referred to our collision reporting center, and 14 of them handled by our officers. Moving on to community services. Again, another month when Jason was quite busy. I was dealing with the Alpha Street Resource Community group there, planning an event for the spring. He was meeting with some newcomers, some Syrian women, discussing possible policing opportunities. Engaged in a partnership with Bylaw, Public Health, and the Catholic School Board. Working with them quite a lot regarding some of the issues up around St. Mary's School. The population at St. Mary's School has increased significantly up there. There's been several problems with neighbors up in that area. Also, some safety issues with some of the traffic there, and also student drivers from the school. Did a presentation to the region on common frauds and scams. Notre Dame School has social media awareness and the law of grade 7s and 8s. St. Dominic Savio, social media awareness and law, and the same presentation as well with Eastridge School. And he was down in the Peel region during the month taking the OSPSB media communications course, and he also took part in our Indigenous cultural training. You'll see there a nice photo of some students from St. Dominic Savio after an educational session on internet safety and social media awareness, and those are socks that we provide for the students with our insignia on it. The students seem to be quite fond of some of the swag like that. That's it for community services.
Just to tell you, he also made a fantastic presentation yesterday morning. Silverseas had the audience totally captured. He talked about spams and fraud, and some people had incidents and got a good awareness of what is going on. Just in personal one, even yesterday morning, received an email scam, and he explained all what they're looking for and what's happening. So that was very good. And on the way out, he talked to the front desk and said, Oh, yes, I'll be back this afternoon to make that presentation to the Legion at 2 o'clock. So I mean, that is, I think, excellent exposure. We're hearing that more with Core and with Jason. I think that's fantastic.
Jason does excellent presentations.
Why, he sure does.
He's keeping very busy, so very
That's
active
good.
in the community. Moving on to lost hours and training, we had 10 members report sick or injured during the month of April for a total of 38 shifts and 399 hours. We had 2 members that were on WSIB during the month for a total of 214 hours. In addition to those 6 hours, we had 6 full-time employees that were absent due to pandemic-related absence, quarantine for a total of 537 hours. We have of the members on WSIB, one's on modified duties, another one means long-term, and we have 2 members that are on LTD. We had our cultural mindfulness training at Silver Lake Camp provided by George Kuchi from Red Hawk Training. And this training was provided in a partnership with the Indigenous Friendship Center, and we had 18 members receive the training this time through, and we're going to be having George back again in the fall for to get some more members. We had 1 member complete coach officer course. 1 member attended a first aid trainer course down in Oshawa. So they provide first aid training to our members. And as I mentioned before, Jason Crane attended the media relations course at Kiel. That's it for lost hours training. Moving on to frontline patrol. We had 198 HTA charges laid during April by our officers, 123 cautions, 82 criminal code charges, and 152 hours of patrol. For 11 on-duty ride checks, 9 hours of ride in that, and 203 vehicle drivers checked. And during the month, 2 drivers were charged with impaired driving. Are any questions? That's my report.
Thanks, Jeff. Moving on to reports from Director Flamey, and who's going to be Director Flamey today? Okay.
Some board bylaws, there's report on these regularly, but it's just general ins and outs of taxi licensing and adult entertainment. Not sure if it's increased demand or staffing levels, but I have noticed we're getting number more new taxi licenses, new drivers wanting to do that. So I'm not sure if that's staff turnover or just extra people sought out of the ordinary. For our courts, 47 people here in custody, total of 985 hours special constable time, which is up over last year. I made some inquiries on that and had some discussion with the chief on it. And what's happening there is as the courts are reopening, they're holding Superior Court matters up at the courts now, and they're bringing prisoners in before that. So we're having staff the cell block area of the courts, but in addition, they've kept the process where regular prisoners are still appearing virtually through cell block here. So that effect is what it's done for us. We're now having staff in court for 2 detention facilities during daytime hours, where previously during the day all of our prisoners would end up heading up to the courts and staffing the court cell block too. So that's going to be a topic that the chief's going to bring up in one of the next joint court meetings to see where that's headed, just because it's costing us additional hours at the moment. And lastly, for the records report, 7,748 bulk searches completed in April. It still is up over last year, but it's down a little bit with the numbers that we've been reporting recently. And the reason for that is just around some staffing vacancies we've had that are in the process of being filled right now. So the opportunities are still there to pick up those third-party records checks, but we have a couple of people just getting trained, so it just represents a bit of a gap in some for sunblock monitors. Those numbers will be picking up shortly as people come on board to be doing that. So we're still in good shape with higher numbers than we had last year. Absent of any questions? Director Flynn.
Thank you, Secretary. Moving on to Director of Corporate Services reports. Madison.
So our calls for service in April were 1,460 for service. That's up very slightly over April of last year. Overall, in the first 4 months of 2022, we're just down very slightly over the same period last year, but just over 3% decrease in calls from service. That's it for Suzanne's report.
Just to comment on that, having had the small and mid meetings with the other chiefs, there aren't many there. As always, calls for service continue to increase across the province. So us being down is actually fairly significant. That we were down from August of last year, and now we're still continuing down slightly. So trending in the right direction. I can take on with Director Hill's IT report. So continuing to work on the upgrade of the own sound police service map. It's really lengthy because of the number of areas that we dispatch. But they did a number of additions and changes to the road networks and automatic aids for some of the fire departments. So that's been time. That's been a lot of time doing that. Some testing of Metrolinx dispatch map. As you know, Metrolinx covers huge area, not just for GO trains, but for GO bus service. So that's a majority of Southern Ontario. So that's a huge map that they're assisting with the testing on that. So that's taking a good time. Our parking gates at the OSPS, 2 gates are now completed, and we just require 1 more part for replacement to get the 3rd gate going, and then that will be completely done. They've ordered the part, they've been up and they've worked on it. They had to change the power supply out to, so there's been a lot of problems, because, and partly because it was inactive for as long as it was. They completed cars 74 and 76 for officers, and 62 and 63 have been removed from regular operations. So that was a welcome change to the fleet. They've done a replacement of photocopiers and configured the new ones for all machines and users. So every time you change, everybody on the network has to be updated for the printer, because it's a printer for everyone as well. So we've been doing a lot of work with NG91 pricing and radio integration with other optic agencies, and ongoing NG901 compliance testing at the main and alternate site, and as well working with Bell to get all the infrastructure done and ready so that we can definite date that we start NG901 and we can start doing the training. And that's it. Director Hill.
Thank you, Jake. Moving on to back to you, I guess, with the financial report.
Yeah. So, made some notes here. So, to look at the summary, it shows that we're just under by 2.23%, $178,000. So, I'm still working with Emily on getting this in the city and setting it up so that it does take smooth out some of the monthly variances. You'll see that it appears that we're under, but if you look at the civilian 3,200, it shows that we're April year to date $450 in revenue and no cost so far. The summary, and that's because we're getting people paying for dispatch services for the year ahead. So it kind of skews the numbers and it throws everything off. But when you look at it, you break it down, and because we're 90% salaries and benefits, if you look at the main sections for in each 4 salaries and benefits, we're under by about 200,000 for police. We're over slightly for dispatch, just from where we should be, 36,000. So generally, we're right on track and we're in the right area. One of the areas that has changed as well with the purchase of those 2 new cruisers, our automobiles line has gone up quite a bit. So that's in already for this year, for the whole year. So the capital's out of whack a little bit because we're making big purchases, and some of our major expenses for, have been paid for the year, some of their purchases, services, things like that. So we're trying to figure out how to best move it forward so that it takes in those fluctuations and it gives a better idea of the monthly. But that's still a work in progress. But there are no concerns at this time. So having said that, subject to any questions? Accounts?
I just noticed that you said some of the dispatches paid for the full year already. Okay, so that's when we're looking at, if dispatch to date is $925,000, we're 53% of budget income till the end of April, so we're ahead of the game on that. On income. Our accounts receivable are probably zero.
Right now, probably very close to it. We have really good customers that pay the bills and give them on time or ahead of time, so it's a good thing, but it does fluctuate. It does make the numbers fluctuate up and down a lot more.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the next item.
So the next one, looking for approval to pay the board expenses of $67,638.48 or for the month of April.
A motion for that, Joe, thank you. Second, Eric. All in favor? Moving on to operating reports from Chief Coots.
So as you can see, the month of April, some holidays and sick time. There were 2 days spent virtually on the Canadian Association of Chiefs Police Substance Abuse Committee. Great Bruce Police Leaders Call. We still have that started during COVID. And initially it started just related to COVID and changes and shutdowns and all those things, but there's been a real value of keeping everybody together and connected. So it's about a half an hour every other week that we just sit down and go over what's new and what changes. So that's been a real positive still of the pandemic. Dispatch and NG 911 meetings. We had a meeting with the Canadian Mental Health Great Bruce related to MHART and the strategy of how we modernize that and work to improve the product that we're doing. And so working with McFarland from CMHA, Great Bruce will look at augmenting our response in MHART. As well, alcohol and drug strategy, meetings with the City of Owen Sounds, including the facilities review. They have a new facilities person there, and they were over and did a complete tour of the building with all of our members, with our senior staff members. OSPSB had a CEO day in Vaughan related to the election and just the fact that they haven't been together that much. Spent a number of hours out of the cultural awareness with Liquid on, and say also a fundraising announcement from Great Bruce Health Sciences about the allotment for Bayview School for the addictions research that participated in virtually. And as well, the market outreach, just that's the response to the needs of the individuals, where everybody's taking the services to the individuals at the market. And we're going to be running a barbecue with hosting a barbecue there for those individuals sometime in June. And that's it. Yeah, I can report.
Okay. Just to follow up on the policy and procedure review work. It must be 19 hours.
Yeah, that was over the course of the month, but yeah, the three of us have been spending a lot of time trying to get those all done and finished with our consultant, Dave Preston. We're pretty much done. I think there's only a handful left to do of almost 200 procedures, and then once they're all done, then they'll be sent out to the members. We're just trying to figure out how best to do that so that they're registered and logged, so they ensure that they've read them and it's captured for future reference. And then as well, the 19 hours it's fairly it's a lot of commitment, but the board will also have to go over all their policies. So at some point, they will have to either come to a meeting or have a separate meeting for the board to go over and recommend as we standards say, the board has a policy and then we have a procedure. So For everyone that we do, you have one as well.
200?
But yours basically say that, you know, the responsibility of the board to have a policy on this, and then we implement it. And make it lengthy. So, all the details in the procedure, so, but you will have, at some point, you'll have to go through. But it is nice to say that we would never have gotten through that working off the side of a desk and trying to get caught up and make sure that we covered everything off. And so the fact that it's all done and caught up, and we're going to keep that consultant on to make sure that we maintain them and for the time being, and just keep up to date so that we don't have to worry about it. And we're always going to be compliant. It's going to be a big benefit.
For sure. Okay. Any other items, new business? Board members?
Just one thing, and that is that we've had a couple of SIU matters recently, both are closed. Both found no wrongdoing on the part of any of our officers. We can discuss in a little bit further detail, but basically, the first one, the report came out last month and found that the allegations were unfounded, and the second one, after brief interviews with the officers involved, they closed that one as well. Unfounded. So there were no lengthy investigations and no reports. Okay.
You want to talk about AL?
Yes. So that's the other one here. So as the board is aware, March 13th, the government eliminated license plate renewal fees. But and at the same time, they introduced an ALPR technology grant. It's one-time funding for 2022-2023. We were provided with a grant amount by the ministry based on our previous submissions on the number of vehicles that we have and the size of our service. And the ALPR technology grant was $95,274. I can give you a copy of this as well. So that's our maximum allocation. Jeff's done the ALPR grant, and so basically what it comes down to is we have to make a decision on where we're going to go as far as spending that money and allocating for the system. So Jeff, you want to just do a quick summary on that?
Sure. So as the chief was saying, just over $95,000 has been allocated for us. So we already have one ALPR system, and that was obtained through a grant that they did in 2019-2020, and we got it through Motorola Solutions, which used to be a company called Vigilant. We have a current quote, and they're considered generally the standard. There is another company device that's not as good. So we have a current quote for the ALPR systems, and that's $27,162. And the ministry will fund up to $30,000 per unit. So there's still a bit of space in there. If we got 3 units, it would be $81,486, which still leaves some unused money there. Or we could get 4 units at a cost of $108,648. That would end up fitting, if we got 4 units, that would fit 5 of our vehicles with the ALPR technology. We have a total of 7 frontline patrol vehicles. So we're just looking for the board's input on that. If we should go for 3 ALPR units, go under the funding, or spend a little bit more money and get the extra device.
So just so I understand, so there's no stickers anymore. So
That's right. So just a bit of background on ALPR. So ALPR stands for Automated License Plate Recognition. So what the technology does is there's cameras on the cruisers, and they recognize the plates on vehicles very rapidly, and they translate that into text for, excuse me, for the system, and it continually is running those plates through. So the camera systems are mounted on the front of the cruiser. There would be an angled unit to get parked vehicles, and then there would be a unit on the back that is getting vehicles from behind. So it's continually running all those plates, and it can detect suspended drivers, plates that are not validated. So you won't get a sticker anymore, but you still have to pay for validating your plates. They can pick up people who are into that vehicle who are wanted. They can pick up people who are human trafficking victims who are linked to that vehicle. So that there's a wide range of things. And police can actually, individual services can add what's called hot lists to the system, which is so locally people that we want to have surveillance on, or we want to ensure the safety of certain victims. We can add them to the system so that if an officer detects the vehicle, they can zero in on where that vehicle is and check on the person, or if it's an enforcement action required, they can go and deal with that vehicle as well. So,
How long does it take from time of read to recognition?
it's automatic. It's
Instantaneous.
instantaneous.
Okay.
For, no, it just sounded,
There's, the requirement's gonna be, you don't have to pay, but you still have to register your vehicle and keep it up.
Yeah.
Okay, so, there are gonna be a lot more probably without reminders and without stickers to look at, but there's gonna be a lot more of those. And, as well, no insurance, and also, it can also detect no insurance, that's already on there. So, it is a great enforcement tool, and obviously the recommendation coming from us would be that, not leave any money on the table, a little bit more income before the judge and get 4 units.
I agree. You want a motion?
Yes, please.
Or,
Thanks, John. Start.
all in favor? I've seen
Thank
that
you.
at the conference a couple of years ago. We went for a ride, and it totally impressed. I mean, just stunning. You go through a parking lot, you pick up 4 plates.
Yeah.
I mean, and
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
When that technology first came out, it was a 10 to 15 second delay on
Yeah.
getting, which was really problematic. Driving around and tell you what would hit, okay, 15 seconds ago.
Right.
2 parking lots ago.
As they go by, it's being.
It's impressive. That's good.
I assume this is the future.
Oh,
They
yeah.
wanted it all.
Yeah.
And Jeff, great work on putting all the information together, doing the report up for me and my absence and the grant, Jeff's done all the grant work on that as well.
Thanks so much.
Also make it very difficult to drive a stolen vehicle. And, these original plates on it, so it's really cut down on.
Anything else under new business? Right. Having completed all the items on the agenda, we terminate the meeting at 11:10. Thank you, Dwayne. Appreciate your participation. Maybe we'll see you in person.
You bet. Take care, folks. Talk to you soon. Take care.